Okay. We might be
Can
more
you
clicks.
hear us?
Maybe no. So he's like, I heard a click, but that's about it. Oh,
Yes,
wait,
there we go.
success.
All right, just had to
Hey, we live. All
tinker with
right.
some settings.
We did it.
You know
Guys,
the
we did an audio.
listen. This happens at the beginning of every stream I have ever seen, ever. So
We did it. We did it. All right.
big
Well, let
success.
me let me
Start
relaunch
all over.
into yeah, we'll just start it right back over again. Welcome everybody to the Scary M Word, a panel that I named because every time I've ever talked about marketing in the TTRPG space, somebody has responded that they find it scary. And I'm here to tell you it is not as scary as you probably think it is, and I'm going to tell you why and also give you some tools to help hopefully make it less scary over time. Really, the only way to get past that initial hurdle of being, a little trepidatious about it is to just do it a lot more. And we'll talk about some things that will help you get into doing that more throughout the night. First thing I want to go over, though, is a big thank you to Diversity Saves, who is sponsoring this event. Daniel and I are both a part of Diversity Saves. Diversity Saves is a 501c3 that is dedicated to helping marginalized communities within the TTRPG community uh, sphere, the creators more specifically. We do that through direct grants for projects that they're working on, as well as outreach programs and things like this, in which we are hosting, hopefully, to give you guys something educational for the night. But if you want to check out more about Diversity Saves, highly encourage you to check us out on any social media. We're on all of them. And also, you can check us out at diversitysaves.org, where you can learn more about us and our mission. So, thank you, Diversity Saves, for putting this on. But before I get into everything else, I want to make sure that you know who we are and what we're about, so that you at least know why there are two people talking at you about marketing tonight. First, I'm going to introduce my co-panelist here, my good friend Daniel Gonzales, the president of Diversity Saves, and a wonderful person with a great marketing background. Daniel,
Oh,
anything you want to share?
well, oh, thank you. Yeah, my name is Daniel Gonzales. I've been working in the TTRPG space in some capacity or another for about 5 years now, both as an independent creator and freelancer, as well as working in the marketing and business management side of things, as well as some product management. Um, I've worked with clients in terms of like client growth and social media management, such as Chain Peku. I've worked with Tom Kartos, the Dungeon Cast, just in social media and just business consultation. I'm also good at public speaking, consultation roles. In addition to that, I've also done some independent work, such as Night Owl Odysseys, which was a Patreon for 5e adventure building, and eventually decided that I'd rather fuel my passions into the nonprofit world, and hence became Diversity Saves, which I founded with a group of lovely creators and passionate TTRPG people who, with the exception of our lovely Matthew over here, are all from marginalized backgrounds. And we wanted to build a space where people could come together and celebrate and uplift marginalized creators, as well as help them get a foothold in this industry, which can be extremely difficult. Hence
Absolutely.
the direct grants that we help to fund. So far, we've done 4 direct grants earlier this year, with hopefully many more to come. I'll talk more about Diversity Saves later, but that's my background. And now, Matthew, who is much more qualified when it comes to the marketing and building an audience sphere, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. I don't know how much I believe that, but it's okay. I'm Matthew. I am one half of the creative duo behind AbyssalBrews. We create um, all kinds of magic items, subclasses, systems, creatures, and more for Dungeons and Dragons, as well as Pathfinder 2E. But my background outside of the TTRPG sphere is probably where a lot more of this becomes intrinsically relevant. My background is actually in graphic design. I started off with just making pretty pixels for quite a bit of time, whether it be freelance or in my normal day-to-day job where I work a wonderful 9 to 5 for a large university. But over the years, that role has expanded quite a bit to take on marketing as well. So now I have been working within a marketing department doing graphic design, as well as presentation of brand standards and development of new brands for somewhere around 15 to 16 years now. In my free time, I also do freelance work for other groups, whether it be graphic design for Kickstarters and things of that nature. Recently, I worked on the Into the Wilds Kickstarter with Tom Cardos, but outside of that, I've done a number of websites, marketing presences, social media presences, and things of that nature for various folks inside and outside the TTRPG community. So that's my background, and that's why I'm here talking to you about marketing, because I don't find it scary anymore. Yeah.
He's the only one.
So, all right, let's get into the actual panel itself. First, I'm going to give you a little brief of what this panel is and what this panel isn't. What this panel is meant to be is a beginner-focused panel with a direct direct focus on creating interesting things for your brand, establishing a brand for yourself, and then figuring out how to create marketing messages within that brand. I specifically want to focus on beginners for this panel. So if you're already coming in here and you've had, several successful Kickstarters, or if you're somebody who is, running a larger Patreon than I'm not going to be able to give you much more information than what you probably already have. But for a lot of people, I've heard from them that they don't even know where to get started when they talk about branding and marketing. And that's what this panel is for. We might do some more deep dives in the future on specific marketing topics, but tonight this is entirely focused on the beginner aspects of establishing a brand and how you go about doing that and build one out over time.
It's those first steps of building an audience.
Absolutely. What this isn't going to be is a deep dive on any particular topic, nor is this going to be a prescription. I'm not going to give you here are the steps that tell you how to be good at marketing, or here are the steps to build a successful brand. That doesn't exist. It's a snake oil thing. If anybody tries to tell you that here's the exact steps to build this out, it's never going to be quite that real. The reality of it is, I think a lot of branding is individual because each person wants to represent themselves and their company differently. How I grew AbyssalBrews isn't going to be how you grow your TTRPG project. So don't think of this as a prescription. Think of this as some tools and a little bit of base knowledge to get you in the door. And I think with that, we're good to move on to our first actual topic for the panel, which is establishing a brand voice. This is something you actually have a little bit of experience in, though. You set up
Yeah. Well, both with Night Owl Odysseys and as somebody who has juggled more than one client in the social media space. One of the most important parts of brand voice, I would say, is consistency. You want to establish early on kind of what you're going to sound like to your audience, how you're going to present yourself, and really kind of craft a personality around that. That isn't to say that it isn't who you really are, or that it's not a genuine connection that you'll make with your audience, as much as it is to say, like, whenever you're crafting an online persona, and this is whether it's for personal or professional space, you choose and pick what you show to your audience, and that helps to establish what your brand voice is. Once you've established that voice, you want to keep it as consistent as possible, and really just have it be something that people can come to rely on and expect from you on a regular basis.
Yeah, one of the biggest things that I think people struggle with is how do they present the entire aspects of their personality. They get very tied into the work and think that they need to present every part of themselves as, something that goes public. And that's just not the case. That's not truth. There are a lot of parts of my real life that aren't part of my public persona and branding, and that's intentional and that's okay. You're not lying to your audience at all. I don't think you should say like, "Oh, I'm this thing," when you're, not. But what you can tell people are the things that matter when you present your brand. So, a good example of this, kind of a practical example for Abyssal Brews, and I'll be talking a lot about that since that's my, current largest project, is that I often present Fernando and I as two guys with 9 to 5 jobs because that is what we are. During the day, we work our regular jobs, and at night, we make Abyssal Brews. That's how we function. That's a part of myself that I've chosen to enhance and present as part of my brand persona and my brand voice. But there's a lot else, other things that I do that aren't part of the brand voice. I don't necessarily talk about my charity work outside of diversity saves, or I don't necessarily, talk about my trips downtown to the farmers market all the time, but I do.
I was going to say you've posted about that a few times.
I
I've
do.
seen
I
them.
do.
I think actually from our comments, Miralock hit the perfect word for it. It's curation, right? You're
Yes.
curating what your audience is seeing about you, what they're learning about you, and how they're going to identify with you. Um, like Matthew said, they don't need to know every aspect of your life. They don't need to know every little detail. You're not lying by omission. That's
Yeah.
kind of
That's important. You
yeah.
need to maintain truth.
And the other side of it is also you need to maintain boundaries, right?
Yes.
You don't necessarily need to share everything with your audience, especially as you get bigger, because it can also be potentially dangerous for some creators out there. There's always the risk of doxing and other issues. And it just kind of helps to set a healthy boundary early of like, this is who I am online, this is what I'm representing for my brand, and this is what people are going to know me for.
Exactly.
And that's it, and that's okay. Like, it doesn't have to be everything.
Right. But truth will take you a long way.
Yeah.
Whenever you're talking to your audience, whenever you're telling them about things, speaking from the place that you're actually coming from as a creator is often very important. Brand voice is as much a person as you are. You need to set those boundaries, as Daniel said, but you need to enforce those boundaries too. Whenever you are getting ready to make some marketing piece, it's important to ask yourself often, does this fit the brand voice?
Mm-hmm.
And if you answer no to that question, if you say, no, this does not fit my brand voice, then you need to ask, is this really something I should post? And if it is something that you should post, you consider it not in your brand voice, but it is something that you should post because it's important for another reason, then that circles around to a third part that you need to do, which is acknowledging when you step outside of your brand voice.
Mm-hmm.
A big thing happened in January within the D&D specifically creator community, which is WotC pulled a whoopsie daisy. We'll say that. We'll be very generous and
Yeah.
say WotC pulled a whoopsie daisy. Um, and in that time, I made a lot of posts that were not within Abyssal Brews brand voice. The reason being, Abyssal Brews is very much a brand that, and it's a reflection of my own personality. I'm not super interested in a lot of the, day to day kind of dialogue that might take place on social media. That's not my strong suit. I don't keep up with it very well. But whenever something that big and industry shaking was going on, where it had the potential to impact dozens, if not hundreds, of creators, as well as people who are in our audiences, it was important for me to step outside of my brand voice and make my audience aware of what was going on. I still tried to maintain some level of that brand voice. I still spoke from a place where it was calm, measured, reasonable. That's something that I try to, be reasonably often. But it was still a step outside of what we normally post. It wasn't, happy. It wasn't exciting. It wasn't, this is fun, because that wasn't fun. But we needed to inform our audience. But I acknowledged it often. Using words. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, and even then, like was still within the purview of your brand. Like,
Exactly.
it was still TTRPG related. The OGL situation was something that was far-reaching for both fans and creators alike, and it was something that
Absolutely.
obviously shook our industry for quite a bit. So it was something that was still relevant to AbyssalBrews. It was something that was still relevant to many creators who stepped outside of their normal branding role to say, hey, like, this is something we need to talk about. This is something that I am passionate about and want to speak to my audience about for awareness. And that goes back to the question of considering whether or not you should post something. There are going to be times in your life where something happens, where there's a big moment that you want to share. You have a big audience, and you have to determine for yourself whether or not what you're putting out there is relevant to your audience, and whether or not you are going to be ready to deal with the repercussions of sharing that with your audience. And that isn't to say that you shouldn't ever, get political or get personal on your marketing profile. It's just to say that when you're doing that, you have to be aware of possible risks that may come with that, or backlash if you post a hot take that other people might not share, or in the case of the OGL situation, I know that for me and a lot of other people, Matthew, AbyssalBrews, and a handful of other creators really became like a resounding voice during the OGL situation, to where people started to expect updates once the ball was rolling, and once you hit that ball down the hill, you got to keep going with it until it's done.
Yeah, you're already stuck in the snowball, and now as far as it rolls and as big as it gets, you're in that snowball.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that's actually a good point to jump to kind of our next topic, which is a marketing plan and how you develop one of those. But more specifically, a tool that I love dearly, which I don't think everybody in the marketing world loves as much as I do. But that is the SWOT analysis.
Coming from a project management standpoint, when I saw this slide, I loved you a little bit more, Matthew. SWOT analysis is my bread and butter.
I love a SWOT analysis. So SWOT analysis is a tool that is often used in project management, which is probably why Daniel loves it so much. Mm-hmm. That's a lot more of his background. I have been a part of large projects for enough time at this point to understand their value and see where I can apply them in other places. So let's talk about a SWOT analysis insofar as how you use it in making a marketing plan. For me, anytime I'm establishing a marketing plan, this is one of my first steps after figuring out what I'm going to make. So SWOT is SWOT, not SWAT. We are not out here kicking down people's doors, thankfully. But SWOT analysis is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's literally just a list of 4 things that you categorize and write them down for yourself so that you can understand a little bit more about your brand and the creations that you're making. So the first thing is really obvious: strengths. What you're good at. That's the easiest thing I think a lot of people have when they're making a SWOT analysis. I don't know, maybe not you.
I don't know. I know a lot of people who are not great at identifying their own strengths. But I think
that's true.
I think it's one of those things where when you're getting so SWOT analysis is something that you don't just do once, for the record.
Right. Absolutely.
You want to do a SWOT analysis when you start a project, at any major checkpoints, and then when you finish a project. And when I say finish a project, I mean, let's say you're running a Kickstarter. When the Kickstarter is over, you take a look and say, okay, well, where were we strong? Where were we weak? What can we do to fix situations? And what are issues that came up that we can prevent in the future, or that we can anticipate in the future, which is essentially what SWOT is. So you want to do it beginning and middle and end. In terms of identifying your strengths, I know plenty of people, me, who struggle with saying, yes, I'm good at this one thing. And so it may not necessarily be that you see it as a strength as much as this is what I can contribute. This is what I am bringing to this project. So if you're a writer and you want to write, that's your strength in this instance. If you're an artist and you're looking to, put together some illustrations, that is your strength in this instance. It's what your strongest contribution is, not necessarily what you're quote unquote the best at.
And also within that, you can have some individual strengths that are kind of more, I would say, directed than just, oh, I'm a good writer. This is a time where you can acknowledge your own style. So say that you are really well versed in 1980s horror, and you are making a project where that knowledge can be absolutely relevant, because you're passionate about that and you want to make something like, The Last Girl. That's a game that
Yeah.
was made by people who are very passionate about 1980s slasher movies, right? So it makes sense for those folks who were really involved in that. That would be a strength for them. If you have just that weird knowledge set, or you're really good at presenting intriguing mysteries, that can be a very strong strength as well. You don't have to keep it broad. You can keep it narrow depending on what kind of focus you're having for a project. Next up, maybe this one is easier then for people, and that is weaknesses. Weaknesses are hard for the reason of, I think some people don't understand kind of how a weakness can impact a project negatively. It might be that you are not the strongest at calendaring, and that can actually be far more impactful than you realize in a project. Like, oh, I'm making a TTRPG thing. How could weaknesses be that difficult, or how could calendaring be a problem with that? Well, if you're making a Kickstarter, calendaring's a huge part of it, and you're going to probably need to understand.
Listen, I didn't sign up for this panel to be attacked right now, okay? No, but like procrastination can be a weakness, calendaring, as Matthew said. It could also just be, I need reminders for follow-ups, things like
Yes.
that. Anything where you feel like something might slip between the cracks. I worked on a recent project where the other people on the project were like, look, we're just not great at writing ad copy. Like it's... we had a dedicated writer for the project, and they just weren't comfortable with marketing their own material. And so, fortunately, I was able to step in and help in that situation. But like that's where we identified a weakness, and we're able to say, okay, how are we going to address that? And in our case, it was having someone else on the team step in for that.
Sorry, I was replying to Kai. Anyway, but yeah, that's absolutely true. Reminding yourself that weaknesses aren't meant to be attacks either. That's something that I always have told my teams whenever we're working on it. A weakness isn't meant to be an attack. It's meant to be an acknowledgement of, here's where things can fall down. A particular example of that for me is that I often assume people know more than they do when I'm speaking about a topic. So when it comes to design or a brand standard or something like that, I'm often speaking at a bit too high of a place, and I need to remind myself to bring it down to the functional level to talk to people who are more in the weeds than I am at like my project management part. So that's an important thing to remember whenever you're writing your weaknesses. It can also be something that maybe you feel is like, oh, I hate acknowledging that I'm bad at that, but it's important to remember you are identifying it so that you can work on it, or you are identifying it so that everyone can be aware of it, as opposed to thinking of it as like an attack on yourself or admitting a failure. So it's kind of divorcing yourself from that. I think the next one for me is the least exciting of them. I don't know why, but opportunities are not as fun for me.
I disagree.
Do you have a feeling?
I disagree.
That's fine.
So
Let's hear it.
I disagree because opportunities it's a chance for growth. It's a chance for learning. It could be something as simple as, if you're working on a team, shadowing someone else on the team who knows something that you don't, that you want to learn. But for me, I always enjoy learning how to use new tools, how to automate more of my process, or just find new ways to streamline whatever I'm working on. So the opportunity could be like, oh, well, I've never used, this is a bad example in 2023, but Twitter ads before. So this is an opportunity for me to learn how to use, a paid ad system. Last
We'll
year,
talk about
that would
that
have
more
been
later.
much more interesting. Uh, but in any case, or like, oh, well, we wanted to set up a mailing list for this, and I've always wanted to figure that out so that I could do it for
Yeah.
other aspects of my business, whatever it may be. Those all present opportunities for you to take on a role you may not traditionally have had, or to learn more about an aspect of your business that you've been lacking on otherwise. And as anyone in the creator space can tell you, we all wear many, many, many hats. So there are lots and lots of opportunities to learn how to use different tools in different ways. Um, and yes, from our chat, that is a good point. Or sorry, I misread your comment. We did get the question: is there a good way to identify relevant strengths and weaknesses ahead of time when you haven't done the project before? I'll circle back to that in just a second. Just because I wanted to finish my thought on
Go for
opportunities.
it.
So when it comes to opportunities, it's a lot of finding things that are not necessarily weaknesses, but are gaps in knowledge that you want to work on, that you can then quickly adapt to and learn. If it's going to take longer than the project can afford, it has the potential of becoming a weakness.
Right.
So there is a balancing act there, which I think is a good segue back into that question of how to identify relevant
Yeah.
strengths and weaknesses. I would say that a big part of that is just being brutally honest with yourself and your teammates, of sitting down and saying, okay, this is what we want to do for this. This is how we want to approach it. How are we going to do this? It's the how, I think, that then leads to part of that SWOT. What do you think, Matthew?
Yeah, I think that whenever you're, at least for my team, whenever we're tackling something new that we haven't ever done before, a good example of this would be launching a new CMS, which is a content management system. Um, if it's something that we haven't worked in at all before, the biggest point is how. Whenever you're doing SWOT, each part of it is kind of a who, what, where, when, how. And how is the most important question, because that's where you identify gaps in knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
From a gap in knowledge, you can understand what might be a weakness for you, but you can also then, when you're saying how, you can say like, oh, well, I have some. This person has some experience in, launching a new enterprise level CMS. So because they have that little bit of experience that maybe the rest of us didn't know about, that could now be a strength for us. So whenever I think about identifying strengths and weaknesses when I'm approaching something completely new, I usually look to those who, what, where, when, how
Mm-hmm.
questions, and the how being the one that really identifies, how you're going to get from from part A to part B. Um, yeah, the brutally honest thing is important. Know your
Mm-hmm.
toxic traits, because we all have them.
And one other thing to note, I know we've been talking a lot about SWOT from like a team building perspective and from a
Yeah,
team project perspective.
this is
Um,
individual as well.
for individualism, it also counts. So, to answer Kaya's question in the chat about whether or not SWOT is supposed to be focused on an individual contributor, a team, or a project, it's all of the above. So SWOT doesn't just happen at one level; it happens at all levels at all times, because otherwise, if your role has an aspect that you are weak on or that you need to learn more about, um, but the project as a whole doesn't know that they affect each other unilaterally. But also, one of the things I wanted to touch on when it comes to this, like I said, we've been talking a lot from like a project perspective. If you're an individual creator, knowing your strengths and weaknesses, knowing your opportunities and your threats, which we'll get to obviously, is equally important. While you may not be able to rely on other team members necessarily when it comes to weaknesses that you've identified, that's
Yep.
your opportunity to find tools that may help. Like, if you're like, I'm just really bad at posting on time, like I never post at the same time every day, or I forget to post on social media more than twice a week, that's when you find a tool that will let you schedule ahead of time to
Yep.
post online. Or you find calendar reminder tools if calendaring is your issue, like we spoke about earlier. If you're not a strong artist but you're a writer and you want visual representation, that's when you look into stock art options, or you try to find somebody who maybe you could bring in onto your team as an artist. There's
Yep.
always an
Or
opportunity to
public
learn and grow
use,
from
that
there.
kind of thing too.
Exactly,
Yeah.
of course.
But that's kind of a good way to transition into the last one, which is threats. So these are the things that I think a lot of people think of threats and they're like, well, what is somebody going to show up at my door with a knife? No, that's not the kind of threat we're talking about. We're talking about the things that could
Sure
end your
hope not.
project. Um, at least that's how I identify
Hmm.
threats. Typically, they're
Hmm.
the things that could present such a roadblock that they either end the project or they so vastly harm the project as to perhaps make it untenable to reach a suitable conclusion,
In the
right?
context of CTRPGs, I would also include threats as something that could lose faith with your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So a good example of threats at this point that I think a lot of people have had completely missed out on being a threat was generative AI for imagery. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
folks didn't realize, like writer types, didn't realize that that could be harmful to their projects when some of them started doing it, and then they brought, sometime early this year, like a lot of attention got paid to generative AI and the problems behind it and kind of the ethical questions that are raised by it. I'm not going to dive into all that because that's a whole
It's a whole nother
rabbit
kettle.
hole I'm not going to open up. But when some of the ethical questions started getting raised, people still had projects that were coming out, including generative AI that they had made early in it, and they found out very quickly that the audience didn't like that. They needed to identify a new path to take and kind of circle back on that. So,
Mm-hmm.
something to think about when you're thinking about threats is things that could shut down the project, things that could hurt your brand image, and things that could perhaps upset your audience. Identifying those three things for yourself are really important because then you can plan for them. And that's ultimately what you want to do with each of these steps when you complete a SWOT analysis.
Yeah.
You identify who's strong and slot them where they need to go. You identify where weaknesses are and hopefully put systems into place to minimize those weaknesses. You look at your opportunities and start to expand and grow into them. And you look at your threats and plan for how you're going to step around them.
Mm-hmm. And for the record, threats aren't just like ways to get canceled as well. Like there's plenty of other there's plenty of other ways in which a threat could present itself. It could be fulfillment and
Oh,
logistics
yeah. Yeah.
issues for a Kickstarter, for instance. It could be improper budget. So a lot
Yep.
of Kickstarters, you'll see that they have like a very low funding goal, when in reality they're really shooting for the stars because how else are they going to be able to fund the leather bound book and the cards and the plushie and the et cetera, et
Yep.
cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
And so it's one of those things where a threat could be taking a look and saying, look, like this is our public facing budget, but this is how much we really need to survive this project, and for people to get paid a decent wage, which you should always do. It could also just be losing faith with your audience. I've seen a lot of Kickstarters, especially where they've promised a book by a certain date. That date comes and goes, and if you're not communicating with your audience honestly and regularly, you could lose a lot of faith. And then your next project comes, and maybe they don't want to back it again because they're like, well,
Right.
that last book took an extra 6 months to get to me, and they never said anything and never apologized. Those kind of things happen all the time, and that uh, once you gain your audience's trust, it's very easy to lose. So
Yep.
you always want to be consistent, honest, and frequent with them, especially when it comes to uh, something they've already paid for.
Right. And this is kind of circling back to the brand voice a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once you do your SWOT analysis, look at each of those things and make sure you have ideas of how to address each of them within your kind of presented brand voice that you've established for yourself
Mm-hmm.
previously. Because each of them can be done very easily. You know, communication is extremely important. Um, so once you kind of have identified your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, then you need to think about how your brand voice applies to each of them. And is there messaging that you can put out, around your strengths or your opportunities, things that you're excited about getting involved in, things that you're excited about learning and doing for the first time, and you can share that with your audience in an interesting way that gets them engaged. So that's kind of the basics of SWOT analysis. there's a lot of materials out there that you could delve into about SWOT analysis, some good, some bad. Perhaps I'll try to get together a doc with some of those things afterwards. That'd be
That'd be
nice.
cool. Share it on
Um,
our Discord.
Indeed, share it on the Diversity Saves Discord, where you should all check out. But I think one of the most important things with kind of starting out in your marketing game is identifying where you want to start for your first place. For me, this was quite obviously at the time Twitter. That's where I started, AB. Oh man, that was a bad choice. No, it wasn't too bad.
At the
It was
time, it was a
actually
great
great.
choice. Yeah.
It was great. It grew our brand a lot, and it continues to do so. But I have said this a lot of times to people, but a great presence in one place is much better than a bad presence in a dozen. You might think that, oh, I can cast the widest net and find a great audience in a lot of places. Um, but once you start into kind of where you want to be, the first thing that you should do is establish a good brand presence in one location. Before you start your diversification process, which is the next thing we're going to talk about, I think that you want to make sure that you are establishing a good brand voice in one place, wherever that's comfortable for you. If you're
Mm-hmm.
great with Facebook groups, cool. If you're really good at Twitter, awesome. If you're good with Reddit, great. Wherever you feel comfortable and you're happy, um, that's where you should kind of stick for your first thing. But after that, your next step is diversification, which I think is probably one of the scariest times whenever you're marketing. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, have you you've expanded out to other platforms before? How does it
Multiple
make you
times.
feel?
I hate every minute of it.
Right?
So
It's uncomfortable. It's like tight underwear.
one, one of the hardest parts about diversification of expanding to other platforms is it can feel like you're doubling your workload,
Yes.
which you shouldn't. It should not be. It should not be like it's more work. Don't get me wrong, but it is a moment in which you have to find new ways to do the same work in multiple locations. So if you have a very visual platform, if your brand has a lot of art focused work to
Ugh,
it.
we wouldn't know anybody like that.
um, One of the things, like there are of course pitfalls with like, oh well, different sites use different resolutions, etc., etc. One of the easiest ways to kind of help circumvent that is to find an aspect ratio and a resolution that works for everything. The square is your best friend
1-1,
across
baby.
many platforms.
1080 by 1080. Just do it.
Exactly. And then from there, like I mentioned earlier, there's tons of automation tools that can help with it. But it is a scary step to go from like, yeah, I just post on Twitter every day and look at this stupid meme to like, okay, I have to post on Twitter. I'm going to post on Instagram. I have to take a look at my Pinterest. I
Yep.
have to schedule for Reddit. Like it once it starts growing, it never stops. Um,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
also means that more people are seeing your stuff. So it's a double edged sword. It's a good thing, and also it's a lot of work.
What I will say is that whenever we started, and or whenever you kind of start and you establish a brand voice for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
I actually find it easier to branch out once I already have a good brand voice established.
Mm-hmm.
The reason for that being, all you're really doing is applying your message in a different way in a different place. So, a good example of this for us was early on, we were just posting, to Twitter with our releases. But whenever the first jump that we made to another platform was Instagram, and whenever we did that, my focus there was on, all right, how does this platform engage with my content? And then,
Mm-hmm.
therefore, how should I engage with it? Instagram really likes imagery. It doesn't really care about the text. And that was weird for me coming from Twitter, where that's text is king. That's what your content is for the most part. Sure, images are exciting and people get interested in them, but Instagram is much more of a market that asks for imagery.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I realized that, well, I don't and shouldn't be posting, just memes or whatever there every day. that doesn't really work out. Your content lasts a little bit longer on Instagram. So because of that, it was like, well, then I should just be posting the things that bring value to that location, our items, the things that we actually drive people to, our releases, when we have new art. Those are the things that I should be posting there because that's what the platform values, and therefore that's the value I can get out of the platform.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever you're expanding to a new place, think about what that platform values and what it cares about. Some good examples of this: Instagram cares a lot about imagery. Pinterest cares a lot about imagery as well, making sure that you present it in a way that, really kind of matters. Reddit cares about you following its rules of its individual subreddits, and you better make sure that you know all 17 of them for each of the 12 different subreddits that you post to, because if you don't, you'll get banned. So that's something to think about whenever you're going to Reddit.
Reddit's your favorite platform, then, is what I'm
I
hearing.
love Reddit. Ever
But
since I discovered Postpone, I love Reddit.
that does touch on a point, though, in that for every platform they have house rules, whether they are stated or
Yeah.
unstated rules. Every platform is going to have its own rules. Instagram doesn't like links in posts. I think
Yeah.
there might actually be a soft ban on them. Twitter, typically you don't want to link in the top post because then the algorithm will kick you in the ass. Reddit, they hate self promotion, but also it's kind of a gamble because sometimes it can do really well for you.
Yeah.
So it's really just a matter of finding each platform and then learning what their dynamic is, what their do's and don'ts are, and then to use Kaya's word from earlier, curate what you're posting on each platform, so that it is still within the same streamline of your marketing plan, but also fits their niche. So for Reddit, for instance, if you have something that is visual and usable, Reddit can be your best friend. There are a lot of people
Absolutely.
on there who they want a sample. They want a free sample. It's Costco. They're looking for the bagel bites. And once they get them,
I want the bagel
they
bites,
might
man.
subscribe. They might subscribe. So, Reddit can be hit or miss, but if you follow their rules and you read the subreddit rules, which some are good and some are just people with too much time on their hands, it can be really great or it can be really terrible. It's feast or famine.
Yeah.
And the same thing could be said for Instagram. And then, of course, in the current day and age, there's constantly changing rules for some of them. Instagram used to be great for just pictures. Now videos are king, reels are king. So if you don't have a video format, Instagram may or may not be worth your time.
Yep.
So it's a matter of also taking a look at seeing what a platform needs from you in terms of input and determining whether or not that's the right platform for you to jump to next. If
Right.
you just have static images and memes, TikTok might not be right for you. But if you're posting short videos on Reels, hell yeah, do TikTok too. It's practically the same
Also
platform.
hop on those YouTube shorts, right? Like
Exactly. Yeah.
you need to identify when you're thinking of diversifying to another platform. Don't think about I need to be in X place. Think about what place is good for me.
Mhm.
So for AbyssalBrews, for example, I identified the things that I thought would be good for us. Twitter, obviously, Instagram. Facebook groups are actually pretty good for us, but we approach that in a much more casual standpoint. From rather than posting each week, it's more like, oh, hey, here's 5 things we've developed recently. They're pretty cool. You might like them. If you want more, give us money. That's kind of how we handle that, and it works just fine. Reddit, great for us. Threads in Blue Sky, I'm kind of testing. It's still learning processes there. If anybody tells you they know how to work on Threads or Blue Sky,
No,
don't
they
listen
don't.
to them. We don't know
No, they
anything about
don't.
the algorithm yet. I mean,
We're working on it.
Blue Sky's algorithm is completely open, and yet I still don't understand it. Anyway, we're working on it. Tumblr is a place where I can just kind of do some fire and forget stuff. I just post over there in order to
I've
have
had
something.
posts that I made on Tumblr like 16 months ago. This happened to me the other day, and then I got like 20 likes for it.
It's all
Tumblr is,
about who shares
yeah,
something when. Yeah.
Tumblr is all about
Reblogs.
somebody eventually finding it and reblogging it, and then your post might blow up out of nowhere. Um,
Yeah.
so it's yeah,
It's a
it's kind
very odd platform for that. I will say the ones that have longevity are like Pinterest and Tumblr.
of,
For
mhm.
they're not very throwaway content. They have longevity.
Instagram
But
is longer than Twitter by a
yeah,
fair margin, usually a couple months. But yeah,
yep.
Tumblr and Pinterest, things can live there forever and be found.
But when you're looking for diversification, think about where your content makes sense and not where you necessarily want to be. A good example of this, I mean, Daniel mentioned TikTok. I don't have TikTok and I probably never will, simply because this short form video thing, that's not how I engage with our brand, and that's not how our brand engages anywhere. For folks who are more personality based, or are more, video content regularly, then yeah, that's something to consider. But for me, that's just not a platform that makes sense for my brand. Therefore, I'm not there. I'm not wasting my time on it, trying to ham fist myself into a place that doesn't suit me or my brand. So when we're talking about diversification, yes, it's expanding, but it's also analyzing where you should expand and where you shouldn't. Um, like I said, it's better to be good at a couple places than it is to be bad at a bunch.
Mhm.
But that's a kind of a good point to move on to our next little topic, which are potential pitfalls whenever you are growing a brand. Pitfalls are things that I would say people consider them to be kind of a be all end all or a fix all for certain things. When actually what you're doing is spending money you don't need to, or perhaps spending time or energy that you don't need to. A pitfall, I specifically use that word because, the old pitfall trap, right? Like you don't see it coming and then suddenly you're in a hole. And that's exactly what a lot of these things are. So I want to go over three of them in particular that I think are kind of the most harmful pitfalls that I see new people to the marketing world kind of fall into. And they're all harmful for different reasons. And the first one that we're going to talk about is that ad spend doesn't mean ad conversion. I feel like this one is something that you probably have some experience with,
Yeah,
through the
and it,
Kickstarters and
it
so on.
can be it can be heart wrenching when it happens because it is creating a proper ad takes time, it takes money, and it also takes a little bit of luck. Um, Whether or not your ad hits the right audience at the right time with the right budget um, can be very fickle if you're not spending a lot of money. And then if
Yep.
you're spending a lot of money, there's still the off chance that it just doesn't end in your favor. I think Matthew said it exactly right. Where ad spend doesn't mean ad conversion. So just because you're spending money on an ad doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to make that money back, or that even there's a guarantee of the right eyes hitting your project. It's not to say that spent. That's not to say that ads are not useful,
They
or
are.
that they can't lead to a potential benefit. But just like any other form of marketing, there is a risk there, and there is always the possibility that that money is money spent, but not money earned back.
Yeah.
Which, when it comes to paid ads, can rack up very quickly if you're not careful. Um,
Yeah.
it's also a matter of timing. Like you don't want to do ads too early before a campaign for Kickstarter. You don't want to do them too late after starting a Kickstarter. There's a lot of nuance to ads, and it's not something I would recommend to a first time project,
Yeah.
um, as opposed to organic growth. If you're doing both, then great. But if you're not focusing on organic growth, if you don't have an audience that you're building elsewhere, paid ads are not going to. It's not pay to win. You're not going to
Yeah.
automatically get a success just because you threw more money at the project. Unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that that's kind of an important thing for newer creators. They think that because they've seen, Kickstarters with high marketing budgets, that that's really all they needed to do. But the reality of it is a lot of those Kickstarters you see with high marketing budgets have high marketing budgets because they've already had several successful projects. They have people in the space who are willing to help uplift the project in order
Hmm.
to get it relevant to begin with, and then the ads become more relevant. Um, it's something I always want to tell newer folks is that you should be spending on ads because you're looking for new audience, not because you are trying to get to a certain number or trying to get to a certain place. I think that ad spend is best done when you are looking for new audience to direct somewhere that's already relevant,
Hmm.
not new audience to build some relevance, right? You need to have some sort of thing that you're sending people to that already matters in order for them to really get involved. A good example of this are those Kickstarters, like I was talking about with, um, building up a lot of ad spend before, and then you see the Kickstarter launch. They are already funded within 3 hours, and they're heading towards the moon.
Hmm.
Those first 3 hour funds are never from ad spend on Facebook or Reddit or so on. Those first 3 hours are the audience that you have built up to that point. They're the people who are already aware of your brand and are already excited about it, or are already aware of your project and are already excited about it. But then ad spend does start to matter once you hit that initial breakpoint where you've already tapped out your built-in
It's
audience.
a momentum
That's
builder. Yeah.
right. That's when ad spend gets exciting or gets relevant, because then you start seeing people going to a project and they're like, "Oh man, this funded in 3 hours. They already made $25,000. What is this?"
Hmm.
That's kind of where you start to use ad spend in order to build on top of something that's already relevant. Don't try to push yourself forward, which is actually another pitfall we're going to talk about here, which is the rush to relevance. Um, Ad spend is absolutely not a shortcut. So, a pitfall that people fall into when I say a rush to relevance, they want to be the most important or the biggest or the most exciting thing within X space as quick as they possibly can. No. Brands take time to build. We've been doing Abyssal Brews for 3 years, and uh, just you know, I would say within the last year, I feel like we've hit our stride
Hmm.
for a lot of what we're doing. Our first year was bumbling around on social media while I tried to figure out what to do in order to make us relevant. Our second year was me building up to making us relevant. And meanwhile, Fernando this whole time is just making amazing art, and I'm like, I'm sorry. Uh, but then our third year is kind of where we came into what I would call relevance, where we're making things consistently. We're working with creators that we're excited to be working with. We're getting opportunities to be involved in things that we're excited to be involved in.
Oh, looks like Matthew froze there.
Something before it dies. Those hurt. Those are sad. Ah, stream frozen.
It looks like it's back.
Yay, we're back.
It's a very momentary blip.
Little internet issue. Okay. Hopefully we're back.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. All right. Anyway, so those times whenever you're posting something and nobody's liking, nobody's replying, so on, they suck. And I understand that you want to, rush forward and get into a relevant place where you're making things that are well loved and well liked amongst the community. But there's no shortcut for that. You just have to put in the work every day, every month, all the time. And it's a lot. And I know that that's sad to hear. But rushing to relevance through tactics like paid for viewers or paid for likes or follow for follow tactics tend to lead to a very unengaged audience. Um, And that unengaged audience is
I think we just got
definitely.
back. I
Oh,
thought
we just got
I
back.
thought it was back earlier. My
Oh,
apologies.
Daniel, let
Okay,
me keep talking.
I sure. I mean, I thought we were back, but apparently not. So what we were saying. Apologies for the little blip there.
Frozen again,
Frozen
apparently. Great.
again. What's going on here? Let me check my internet. Yeah, my
Daniel's
Wi-Fi's
internet's a
good.
problem.
Bruh, I'm on gigabit. Calm down.
It's not my internet that's a
It
problem. I
says it's
mean,
okay for me. Yeah, it looks like we're good. Okay.
okay. Are we
Um,
are we all back? Looks like we're back.
weird. Yeah, I think there was a blip for some people. If you're having trouble still seeing the stream, maybe just refresh your browser. Sometimes Twitch doesn't like when a stream starts and stops. So, I think we're okay.
Okay. Cool. Awesome. I'll loop back to the start of
Yeah, let's talk about buying bots.
yeah, so this rush to relevance when you're just posting something, it can get really discouraging. It can feel really bad to be posting to no one, but I guarantee you that posting to no one is doing more for your brand
Mm-hmm.
than some of the nastier things that you can take part in. So what I'm talking about are buying bots, buying likes, buying views, uh, or the bane of my existence, F for F. Follow for follow on social media. I can't stand it because it does nothing for you. All it does is give you a big number of people that don't care about what you're making.
Yeah. So that isn't to say that you shouldn't follow people back that you have a mutual interest with.
Absolutely.
If
Absolutely.
someone follows you and they are creating content that you enjoy, maybe you've had some interactions with them that's been positive. We're not saying don't follow them back,
Yeah,
but there are chains of threads where people say, "Hey, everyone who likes this post or everyone who leaves a comment, follow me and I'll follow you back."
right.
Those are the pitfalls we're referring to, where it just doesn't lead to anything. Like there's no engagement
Mm,
there. They're not gonna like and retweet your stuff or repost
no.
or share in their stories. Um, it's just not worth your time.
Yeah.
Uh, follow for follow is a trap, but
Yep.
gaining more mutuals is not necessarily a bad thing.
Exactly. Building a relevant kind of group that you follow and like the work of and being involved with them and sharing their things, that's absolutely beneficial. That helps boost everybody's audience, that helps get everybody involved. But trying to rush towards the end goal of having 5,000 followers is really useless if those 5,000 followers don't care at all about what you're making. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why we say, trying this rush to being relevant is a huge pitfall, one you definitely want to avoid. And the last one, as far as pitfalls that you want to look out for, is being stuck in a cycle. Being stuck in a cycle means that you have been creating the same thing for a long time and you just continue creating the same thing and you never market it differently and you never produce different messaging for it and you never produce different imagery for it. You just keep making the same thing over and over again and it has never caught on, it's never grown, but you don't change. This loops back a little bit to our SWOT analysis from earlier. The fact that you should be doing it on the regular is this is exactly the reason why you don't want to end up being stuck in a cycle where you're just producing the same thing over and over again. Whenever you do that and you don't go back and kind of analyze your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats over again, you're never going to take that proper time that you need to identify, oh, I'm stuck in a rut and I'm just doing the same thing and we're never growing, we're never finding new audience. I think being stuck in a cycle is probably the one that leads most to burnout
Oh
for
yeah, by
people.
far. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
I think especially if you're stuck in a rut and you're not seeing growth of any kind,
yeah,
I think that's a very quick and easy path to uh, seeing a project fail, because you just find yourself getting frustrated or feeling like there is no relevance to the brand that you're trying to build. And it could be just as simple as just changing up some phrasing and writing some new ad copy, maybe if you're feeling spicy, you could make some new graphics.
Yep.
There's lots of different ways to kind of get out of that churn and to break the cycle of posting the same content. Um,
Or even working with a new artist or working with a
mhm.
new like person as kind of a collaborator
Find a
can
new
go a
style.
long way. Exactly. And I think that some people view like, oh, this project didn't get anywhere that I wanted it to, and I had to shut it down. That means that it's a failure and I need to stop trying. No, reinvent over and
Mhm.
over again. Failure is awesome. I love failing because I learn so much more from it than when I do well.
See, I hate failing, but I know that it's a growth opportunity. I'm not going to say I enjoy it. I think that anybody who says that they love to fail is a masochist. Yes, you. Uh, I think that it's absolutely an opportunity to learn from and to
Yeah,
grow and to figure out if what you are creating is necessarily what you want to create.
yeah,
I think a lot of people go into a project and they start making something because they feel like it's what people want them to make and it's not
yeah,
necessarily what they want to be doing. And that is a very quick and easy way to get back to that burnout stage and not get the fulfillment and growth that you're looking for. Other
right.
times, sometimes a project just isn't, it's wrong time in the wrong place, and it can be really difficult. And Lee, that's an excellent point, that
Yeah,
failure can be
absolutely.
especially hard for people who have rejection sensitivity, such as
Yeah.
neurodivergent people. It's as somebody with ADHD who doesn't suffer from a lot of rejection sensitivity, but still very very much aware of it when it does hit me. Yeah, there have been moments where I've failed on a project and I've been like, well, that's it. TTRP industry is not for me. But then
Yeah.
you find your bearings again. You look for something that is going to reignite your passion, and you make a plan and you learn from your mistakes, which sucks and it's hard
Oh yeah.
and I hate it, but you got to do it.
Yeah, that's basically what it comes down to. I think whenever you're stuck in that cycle and you feel like you're just spinning your wheels, that's why we gave you the tool of the SWOT analysis early
Hmm.
in this, so that we could loop back to it at this point. If you once you hit that point, it's time to go back, reevaluate your brand voice, reevaluate your project, reevaluate your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
Yeah.
And then these are the ways that you can try to work yourself out of a pitfall once you've made your way into it.
Hmm.
Uh, and I think, though, that will bring us to our last little topic of the night. My last little gift, my last tool to you, the marketing funnel, something that will strike fear into the hearts of marketers out there because they try to keep it secret. No, that's not true. No, the thing is, the marketing funnel is really basic and it's obvious once you understand the different stages of it, but it's basically a way of looking at your audience in general segments so that you can talk to each one of them. I find the marketing funnel to be most useful as a way to remind me to address my five audiences. How do you feel about it, Daniel?
I the funnel is one of those things where it is it's as much of a mindset as it is a methodology.
Yeah.
It's one of those instances where like your audience are very real people who have
Yes.
desires and needs, and
And they're
your
all
job
awesome because they support you.
exactly. And some people look at the funnel and they say, "Oh, well, this is just kind of like depersonalizing marketing," and I actually view it very differently from that.
Yeah.
I think that the funnel is a good way of saying like, okay, these are people that I care about, that I want to make a product for. How do I do that best? How do I serve them best?
Right.
And so it can be a little bit of a mentality shift from, well, I'm making things and it's really nice if you give me money, because I mean, sure, yeah, it is, but also like, if you're making something that you think that your audience is better off for having, then you're doing them a disservice by not doing everything you can to get them to your product.
Right. And I think that whenever we're talking about the different audiences here, I don't view it from, like you said, from a point of depersonalization at all.
Hmm.
I think that this is my reminder that I have different audiences that I need to address, that I need to serve, that I need to make sure that I'm taking care of, and that I need to remind myself that, you know, at a base level, the people who are in my audience, whether they've just heard of me or they've been a patron for over a year, whatever their stage is, I need to make sure that I, as a brand and a creator, I'm serving each one of them. So I
Hmm.
view these buckets as, a way to remind myself of where the different people are in their journey with us as a brand, but also, kind of a reminder, I think a lot of the time marketers will depersonalize using the marketing funnel,
Yeah.
and they'll say like, oh, these are just, yeah, here's how
Which
you talk to these. Yeah, right.
that is a pitfall. That
Yeah,
is
I
the
hate that.
definition of a
I hate
pitfall.
that. You need to remember that your audience
Mhm.
are people and they are real people. I think in the TTRPG space, I actually have a much easier time remembering that,
Yeah, yeah.
because whenever I post something, people will be like, hey, a question, and I'm like, I didn't think of that. Awesome. You
Or
helped me.
especially in your audiences, well, not your audience. Sorry, I don't mean to put it that way. But
That's fine.
especially for the kind of content that you create, i.e., magic items. You also have the pleasure of having a lot of people letting you know how you're doing it wrong. Uh,
Yeah, and that's okay.
because naturally with creation there's going to be different opinions, right? And
Yeah.
that's fine. It's just TTRPGs are already a very personal experience for a lot of people, and I think that helps with keeping things personalized and keeping it feeling like you're talking to another person, even when somebody might be marketing towards you. They are still, especially in the creator space where we're not all giant corporations with dozens of employees. Even having been hired as like a social media engagement, manager for a couple different creators, usually that just means that it's me, that creator, like maybe one or two other people who are all helping with their creations. We're not like
Yeah.
giant companies just because they can afford to throw a little bit of money at somebody else to help uh, take some of that work off of them so they can create more.
Yeah.
So it's all still very personal. In I think the TTRPG space in general kind of naturally leans that way because of the nature of the product. And
Yeah.
so many people have such strong opinions about TTRPGs because of the nature of TTRPGs being, something where you're sitting around a table virtually or physically with your friends and playing games and telling stories together. There's really
It's
nothing more personal
intrinsically
than that.
personal. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's intrinsically personal. But I think, kind of giving you an idea of what these audiences are will be helpful, because I need to remember to message for each one of them. And I think that, for folks starting out as a brand, they're like, well, who am I talking to? Right? Like, who am I talking to? How do I know how to talk to them? Use these five kind of bundles as the people that you want to talk to, and consider marketing your messages around them. So the
Mm-hmm.
first one are the awareness stage. These are folks that know you exist, and that's about all. Or they don't know you exist and you're trying to make them know that you exist.
Yeah. So this is really that first step of marketing.
Right. These are the social media posts. These are the posts on Reddit. These are the posts on kind of things where you're trying to find new eyes. Um, these might be kind of broad focused ads. And by that, in the TTRPG space, I usually mean like a free sample on Reddit, or a post to Instagram or something like that. They are introductory by nature. They're saying, we are X, we do Y. And that's the simplest message that you can kind of convey when you're in the awareness stage with somebody. We are X, we do Y. We're AbyssalBrews, we make magic items for D&D and Pathfinder. It's that very first step. And I think this one is the one where people think the most about marketing, right? They're like, this is what marketing is, right? Making people known about me. But that's just the first step of any sort of, brand presence or marketing. I think it gets more interesting when you move to the consideration stage.
Right.
Consideration are where people know about you, they know that you're out there making stuff, but now you need to tell them about your product. What do you think is kind of the best way to approach that in consideration? Do you think it's
So
continued spam or
I think this is kind of so, like you were saying, there's multiple kinds of social media posts, and there's no harm in somebody who is already aware of your product seeing it again, right?
yeah,
So, um, you can have social media posts that are the hey, this is who we are, and then also have follow up posts or other
yeah,
posts in the same platform that are also saying this is what we're about. This is specifically what we're doing to serve our community or to create a product. So I think it's I think the funnel is the perfect metaphor for this because it really is just about narrowing in on that audience and saying, okay, you know who we are, you know what we're doing. Do you know what makes us special? Do you know
right, right.
why our product is good for you?
Why it's
And
better.
so
Yep.
you're just slowly kind of drawing them into like, okay, like you know about us. This is our specialization, and you might lose some attention from this if your brand doesn't fit what they're looking for.
Yeah.
But you're not looking for 100% conversion. You're looking of conversion of the people who want your product.
Exactly. I'm not trying to sell magic items to DMs that play in, a completely different system, right? I know that that's not what I need to do. I'm
Mm.
also not trying to sell them to folks that are very, very particular about they need something that's fit perfectly for their game or a character within them.
Mm-hmm.
That's not who I'm trying to convert. And that's why when we're talking about funnels, it gets smaller as it goes down because certainly the audience gets smaller as it
Yeah,
goes down
yeah.
too. You need to understand you're going to lose some between each stage, and that's fine. I think a good example of, awareness ads are where Abyssal Brews, we make, magic items for Pathfinder and D&D. A good example of consideration ads are, hey, did you know that we make a Foundry VTT module on our Patreon so that you have convenient access to all of our magic items in one of your favorite VTTs?
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Daniel. Daniel handles our conversion for that, so thank
I
you.
also do VTT conversions on the side.
But that's kind of the consideration model that we're talking about. When you get into the consideration audience, you want to inform them about the specifics of your products. We have over 100 magic items that are available to you instantly when you join our Patreon. That kind of stuff. You're informing them about the product, the details of it. They know who you are. Now you need to tell them why you're special. And then comes conversion when they actually give you money, the hardest stage.
Money.
Right.
Yeah. So this is when somebody goes from being a fan to being a customer. So
And your role
conversion,
switches with that too. So we'll
yes,
talk about that in a moment. But
yeah.
go ahead,
So
Daniel.
conversion is where you make a post. Let's say it's a Reddit post, and you say, "Hey, look, here's this magic item I made," and they say, "I love this," and you say, "Well, if you want more, you can buy it here," and they say, "Okay, here's my credit card." That
Right.
is conversion. That is making somebody from a fan to a customer, and I would say arguably conversion is the second most important part of the funnel. A lot of
Right.
people are hyper focused on conversion, and I think conversion is great. But personally, I think advocacy leaps and bounds above it,
Yeah, we'll talk about that more. But
which is the last step. We'll get there. Conversion is, like we said, it's making somebody a customer, and opening a pathway to further communication with them as a customer. And I'll let you talk about kind of how
I
that role.
think that, yeah, I think that was actually really poignant. Opening a method of conversation between you and the customer is actually really important, much more than people realize. Whenever I said, kind of your role switches. Your role, whenever somebody actually converts and gives you money, your role is no longer selling them. It is now supporting them.
Mhm.
You have gone from being like, hey, I'm over here, this is a thing, to now you are directly supporting them in their needs. They have given you currency. So now whether you feel this super strongly or not, you have some manner of responsibility towards them in order to honor the things that you said you would give them. Whenever we're talking about Kickstarter, this means you have a responsibility to provide them with the book that they ordered. If we're talking about Patreon and AB, for example, I have a responsibility to give a new magic item to my patrons every week, as well as one more thing each month.
Mm-hmm.
These are the responsibilities I have to support people because I said I would.
Mm-hmm.
My brand voice says that I will do this, and you know what? My brand action is that I will, in fact, do that.
Yeah, and
Conversion is,
it could also
yeah,
be customer service support in that aspect as
absolutely.
well.
Yeah, I'm
If
having a problem installing something.
Exactly. I'm having a problem installing where, hey, I was under the impression this product was going to include X, Y, and Z, and I don't see Z. Maybe it's a packaging error, or maybe they misunderstood the product, or whatever it may be. I've had products before where I bought something under the assumption that, so I bought a PDF off of DriveThru, and they misworded it to where it sounded like the map packs came with the PDF I was buying when they were two separate packs.
Uh,
I misread it. It was like a little misleading, but it was on me, and that was fine. Um, and I was mostly interested in the map packs because I already had an adventure that I was running. I just needed something that looked like what they had, and so I emailed them and I was like, "Hey, I don't see the map packs because I didn't understand at that point what was going on. Are they not included?" And they said, "Oh no, we're really sorry. Like we'll give you a refund. The map packs are a different pack. Blah 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 blah." And that kind of honesty and transparency, as well as just like the very quick response, was enough for me to be like, "Oh well, I still really, enjoy their products." And so I bought that map pack, and then
right.
I have bought other products from them in the future because just being, you don't always have to be prompt, because sometimes you can't, and that's
Prompt
okay.
is hard.
But being responsive and being communicative are incredibly important once you've converted somebody to a customer.
So this is interesting because there was a perfect example of how somebody took you from the conversion stage to the loyalty stage
Mm-hmm.
simply because of how they acted whenever you needed support during the conversion stage. You made a purchase and you weren't necessarily pleased with what was in it because you felt that something had been misrepresented, maybe because you misread, whatever it would be. But they were prompt, they were friendly, they were helpful, they supported you. You move to the loyalty stage with them. And loyalty is our next part of the funnel. That is whenever they like your brand and they want to support it. Whenever we're talking about, Kickstarters or streams or so on, these are usually the people who are like, oh man, I'm so pumped for this, right? Or, oh, I can't wait to back this, or, oh, I
Mm-hmm.
just backed this, this is exciting. Loyalty is a stage that people will start to um, speak highly of your brand, which is great. That makes you feel good, but also then your responsibility ups a little bit more here. Now you have that continued customer service. And with each step in I always find this funny. With each step in the funnel, you actually gain a bit more responsibility towards those folks, right?
I mean,
Um,
the money is coming in, right? So
right,
of course,
right,
like
right.
one of the other aspects of loyalty is most of the time they'll become a repeat customer at that point,
Yeah,
right? So loyalty isn't, and this isn't to say that somebody who buys something one time and that's it is a bad person. They're not. They're a
no,
customer. You still owe them your support.
support.
But getting to loyalty is where they become a repeat customer, or in the case of Patreon, they've signed up, they've stuck around, they've become part of the community. That sense of loyalty is something that can breed more word of mouth. It also, like Matthew was saying, it increases your responsibility, but they're also somebody who you can rely on to continually be a customer, which
Yeah.
is, it's nice to have a steady income stream. So you can't discount that.
Yeah, loyalty is where you need to offer value more than I think a lot of things like
Mm-hmm.
value and support. Continue to recognize that they have, given you money multiple times or they've been a part of your Patreon for a while, or recognize that they are a long-term supporter, or they've come into a lot of your projects and been involved with them. Um, some little ways that you can do this are, special benefits for folks who have been with you for a while, or like, hey, you backed our last Kickstarter, you get some money off towards our next one. um or just saying like, hey, you backed this Kickstarter, I'm releasing a little add-on for it, you're going to get it for free since you already backed it. It's those kind of things.
It could even be as simple as like a free preview, or like
Yeah.
early bird tiers are increasingly common on Kickstarter. And one of the most common people who's going to be able to get on that early bird is somebody who is already part of. That was my cat. Yes, somebody who is already on a mailing list with you because they've been a previous customer.
Yeah.
Somebody backed a previous Kickstarter. They're going to know about your product. They're already going to be part of the way sold to it. So the lift for getting them from conversion from consideration to conversion is much quicker. So it makes it very easy to say, hey, like we have another product, and as soon as it goes live, there's going to be an early bird tier. You're going to be able to get it for a little bit cheaper than other people.
Yep.
It's an easy way to continue to build upon that loyalty.
Right.
Yes,
Reward people
Harvey,
for supporting you.
I would
Yes.
show you her, but the moment I lift her, my eyeballs will be her targets. So,
Yeah. And then the last one, I think, Daniel, you said this is probably the most important for you, and I agree.
yes.
I absolutely agree. Advocacy is huge. These are the folks that you melt every time.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like if you cry every time. But yeah, the thing is, advocacy is when people like your brand enough and enjoy it enough to start telling other people that they should support you.
Mm-hmm.
These folks are the reward at the end of the funnel. Because I think if you are doing the funnel well and you are treating your customers well, your advocates are your reward. They are, the pot of gold, right? They're the piece of candy. Whatever it is, however you want to view it, they're the folks that are going to support your brand the most. Why do you think that they're the most important to you, Daniel?
I think it's a matter of building trust. So
Heck
when
yeah.
you're taking a look at brand loyalty, and specifically brand advocacy, like we've talked about, getting to the bottom of this funnel, there's somebody who has been most likely a repeated customer who you have shown time and again that not only is your product something that they're going to enjoy, but that you're able to deliver on their expectations. And so
Yep.
they're going to be the ones who are going to then turn around and say, hey, like, have you heard of this product? Have you heard of this creator? They're one of my favorite people. There's a handful of creators that I will go to bat for every day of the week.
Yep.
Not just because they make good products. Like that's always one part of it, but it's also how do they make me feel as a customer? Like, do they have a community that I identify with and that I feel good supporting?
Yeah.
And from my personal perspective, it also comes down to like, what do they do to support marginalized creators and marginalized communities? There's more
Yep.
to brand advocacy than just I like this product. It's one very big part of it, but it's not the only part. And the more check boxes you can fill for each individual, the more they're going to pay that back in dividends by spreading word to friends and family and other people who have common interests,
Yeah.
who will then start down that conversion path as well.
Yeah, they will convert more people than any paid ad ever will.
Mm-hmm.
It's wild how much that works. But I mean, these are the folks though that you've formed relationships with. Let me make that clear as well. Like you've probably, for your advocates, they have had personal interactions with you more than likely. Um, And when I say personal interactions, I mean, like, if we're talking about a big corporation, then we're saying like good customer service interactions,
Mm-hmm.
right? But when we're talking about the TTRPG space, I mean, you've probably chatted with them on Discord somewhere, or you've had some back and forths on a social media quite regularly, or um, they used one of your products in a game that they've run, right? You have a relationship with these people, usually in a way that's more so than they've given me money and used product. They have interacted, they've talked, right? They
It could
are
be
people that you
leaving
know.
comments on a product
Yeah.
page. It could be they've left positive reviews in the past.
Yo,
You've taken a picture together at a convention. Yes, maybe if you're somebody who's on the convention circuit, it could be that they have, met you in person. And for some people, that's enough to be able to breed that sense of loyalty and to, become an advocate for your product. Uh, a lot of people talk negatively about parasocial relationships because there are some pitfalls to it and there are some dangers,
yeah,
but
of course.
it is also kind of a natural aspect of marketing in the social media era, and within the space, especially to where there is some expectation of you being a real person that they can reach out to with a question. And that's something that you have to be prepared for.
Yep. I mean, hey, if I'm going to use that as part of my brand voice, where
Mm-hmm.
Matthew and Fernando from AbyssalBrews were just two dudes, then I need to make sure that I'm representing that to, my advocates and, people that I've converted. Because, yeah, in the end, if you ask me a question that is, relevant to one of my products, you're
Mm-hmm.
going to get a reply because that's what it is. We're just two dudes.
And on
But
the flip side of that, if someone reaches out to you and you're an asshole, it's not hard for them to spread word.
exactly.
So,
Yeah, advocacy is they're kind of the reward, but they're also the people that you do still have a responsibility to.
mm-hmm.
I would say these folks are the ones that it is most important to be kind of humble and thankful to.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's just from I don't know how else to say this, but like just be a good person, right? Say thanks whenever somebody says you make great stuff and people should support you. Like just taking the few moments to reply and say, you know what? Thank you so much for doing that. I really appreciate it. This kind of stuff keeps us going.
I think it really helps to continue to keep into perspective how big of a space the TTRPG industry is and
It's
how few
massive.
people actually manage to make any money off of it. So, like, if you sell a product, you should be immensely grateful that somebody took the time to look at what you had to sell and said, yeah, I do want to run this at my table. I do want to include this in my campaign. It's extraordinarily important that every customer walks away feeling like they are appreciated because
Yeah,
otherwise they might not be a customer again.
exactly. So that is kind of the general breakdown of the marketing funnel. As I said, it was my last thing that I wanted to give to you all, and it was a big one. Just a quick rundown:
Mm-hmm.
awareness, people know that your brand exists. This is who we are. Consideration: here's what we do and how we do it. They're the details. Conversion: that's when they become a customer, they give you money. You need to start supporting them. Your role switches. Loyalty: these are the folks that come back time and time again to be a part of your projects. You should value loyalty by giving benefits in addition to, them for give them value for what they've given to you in the past. And then finally, advocacy: be humble, be thankful. These are the people who are out there selling your product for you through no cost of your own. That's why they're so valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, that is kind of the breakdown of one of my favorite marketing concepts, the marketing funnel. At least how I approach it, which is a reminder to, talk to all five of these people. And with that, that sadly brings us to the end of the scary M word. Before we get into questions, I want to take some time again to thank Diversity Saves for putting this on. Daniel, do you want to give us some info about Diversity Saves and what
Yeah.
people can expect coming up?
As a board member of Diversity Saves, thanking Diversity Saves feels a little bit like patting ourselves on the back. But
Well, you can say that, but also, it took five other people to put this together. So
that's very true. We're a small board at Diversity Saves. There are only six
six of
of us
us.
total. I had to do the math very quickly in my head because I'm terrible. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. All donations that come to us go back out to the community. I think that's probably one of the most important aspects of what we do that I truly cherish is that we are doing everything we can to make sure that this community thrives in a diverse and inclusive space. There are a growing number of people in our Discord community who are helping to bring our whole existence to bigger platforms every day. You know, we constantly have people in there sharing and boosting what we talk about and what we have going. And I'll touch a little bit on kind of what we have coming down the pipeline because we have some very cool events coming. First and foremost, we have our Fight Like a Femme itch bundle, which we have a deadline of August 31st to sign up for. It is an itch bundle that is in honor of, I believe it's not Women's History Month, it's Women Empowerment Month, I believe it's called.
Yes.
So we wanted to put out something that was femme-focused, that we could help to raise funds. Like I said, all of our funds go back into grants. They go back into advocacy for the TTRPG community and diversity and inclusion. In addition to that, we also have for Hispanic Heritage Month, which is September, we are still technically accepting signups, although I think we have enough people to where we're going to start locking things down. We're going to be doing a charity stream September 15th through 17th. I believe I got those dates right this time. I'm double checking that.
They look really right because that's a Friday
yes.
through a Sunday.
Yeah,
they look right.
Our initial Twitter post, I messed that up. But yeah, the weekend of the 15th, we're going to be doing a charity stream of all Hispanic and Latine creators coming together to stream a bunch of different games, starting Friday night and going through Sunday. Just having a good time, raising money for Diversity Saves, that then we can put back into the community. I'm really looking forward to it. It's something that's near and dear to my heart as a Latina creator, and it's something that I've been wanting to do since before I even started Diversity Saves. This is actually one of the aspects that I've been looking the most forward to, is finding other creators who look and sound like me and who come from similar cultural backgrounds to me, to be able to connect with and create with and celebrate our history and shared cultures with. It's very important to us. And if that wasn't enough, the following weekend, our wonderful supporters over at Weave Racers on the weekend of the 22nd.
I'm so excited for this. Sorry.
Are also doing a live stream which is going to benefit Diversity Saves. We are not producing this. This is being produced by Nekala the Druid, who is an amazing producer and organizer, putting this all together on their own shoulders. We'll be stepping in to help whenever and wherever we can. This is a sequel to last year's Weave Racers, so
which I was in, and it was a blast.
I was also in it. It was also a blast.
Yep.
It was amazing. So yeah, there are links in the chat for where to sign up for that as well. Thank you for helping out with that, Kaya. Kaya's also one of our board members. So yeah, we have lots and lots of stuff going on right now. In addition to all of that, we're also looking for our next opportunity to produce more grants. So that'll be coming in hopefully the not so distant future. We want to get back onto that as soon as we can. It's going to be an ebb and flow of raising money and then giving money back out, and raising money and giving money back out. So it's
yeah.
just
something
kind of how
important to note. Every dollar donated goes back out. We don't.
Yeah, none of us take any income from this. This is purely volunteer. And if you do want to volunteer, whether to be a member of our board, to be part of one of our committees, to help in this whole process, we're always looking for more volunteers. Find us on social media, find us on Discord, come join our community, let one of the board members know, hey, I'm interested in volunteering, and we will welcome you with open arms. There's tons and tons of opportunity for volunteers. So reach out to us and let us know, and we'll happily see where we can have you help us out.
Exactly.
Why don't you
Fantastic.
tell us
Well
a little bit
done.
about what you got going on in the world, Matthew?
Oh man, if I always hate following diversity saves because everything about diversity saves is like great and awesome, and I like being involved in it and I love being a part of it. I've been trying to do everything I can to support marginalized communities as a non-member of any myself. The best I can do is support where I can, right? Um, so for me, I think that trying to follow up diversity saves always feels like, and now the marketing,
I mean, if you don't do it, I will, because I know what you
Yeah.
have going on.
So we create weekly, fully illustrated magic items over on Patreon. If you want to check us out, we are on most every social media. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, Reddit, Blue Sky, Threads, Facebook, and anywhere pretty much if you just search for Abyssal Brews or at abyssalbrews.com. We are continuing our series of monthly creatures that we've also been making as well. And outside of that, we've got some other projects coming up this fall that we can't necessarily talk about yet, but I'm hoping to
Abyssal Brews
excite.
has also recently expanded into Pathfinder Second
Yeah.
Edition items, in
Oh
addition to
yeah.
Fifth Edition, including fully implemented Foundry packs.
Yeah, please check those out. If you like Pathfinder, I think we are probably making some of the best stuff out there for it right now. And I try to be humble when it comes to our products, but like Pathfinder is a disappointingly underserved community full of really cool people that make awesome stuff and tell amazing stories in a great system. I fully recommend checking it out, and I think that if you're a creator that's looking at like creating in the 5e world, you should also look at creating in the Pathfinder community because they are sadly underserved when it comes to quality third party products. So something to
Okay.
consider. Yes, we expanded into that. That's exciting. Oh, we'll be at PAX Unplugged as well. So if
Yes.
you want to come talk to us, we will be at PAX Unplugged. Look for Fernando and I. We'll be wearing these most of the time whenever we're available. So if you see Fernando, or if you see anybody wearing these shirts, the only people who have them are Fernando and I. So if you see that, come up, say hi. I'd love to meet you. I'll probably be wearing a mask, so deal with that. But outside of that, I'm excited to be there and excited to take part in Unplugged. It's going to be a blast.
Oh yeah. So,
But we got some time for
questions.
questions. Yeah, let's do it. I think we got about, we'll give it about 15, 20 minutes max, but yeah.
Let's see. Question from Marinus earlier about SWOT analysis. Is there a good way to identify
Oh, we
relevant
did.
strengths and weaknesses ahead of time when you haven't done said project before? We did touch on it. Just to reiterate, this was one of the moments where we said one of the things you have to do is be brutally honest with yourself. You have to sit down and say, um, these are specifically what my strengths are. This is where my focus is. This is what my passion is. However you want to identify your strength, or however you want to focus on that. The key here is to be honest with yourself. And if you find you have a hard time with that, maybe find somebody you trust and say, listen, I want to do this and I want to do it right. Can you help me identify weaknesses? Because I
Yep.
understand that sometimes it's hard. And maybe that's a moment in which you show somebody your project plan and say, hey, if you don't want to make it personal, like, hey, this is what I had for an idea for this project. This is kind of what I had scheduled out for it. Where do you see that I can improve it? And that may be
Yeah.
another way to find strengths and weaknesses.
That's super beneficial, I think, to think about is, asking a friend that you trust to be upfront with you. I'm not talking about the friend that's like everything you do is great. That friend is important as well, and we love them. They should be protected at all costs. But the friend we're talking about is the one who's not afraid to tell you things in a way that is helpful to you, not hurtful, helpful. Um, Daniel, I think you've done that for me a few times when I'm like, eh.
Here's the thing, and I'm like, well,
And I'm
yeah,
like,
no,
okay,
that's what
okay,
good friends are
okay.
for. You
Right,
should be able
right.
to rely on each other to uh, highlight each other's strengths and to aid each other when you find weaknesses.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Anything that we didn't cover that you were dying to know?
Or
Um,
anything that you'd like to see like deep dives on later, if you have any topics like that, because I'd be happy to, do another one of these if
make
there's a
some.
specific topic.
Mhm.
If not, that is a-okay too.
Yeah, that just means that we're amazing and covered all the questions forever.
Indeed. Well, also something to mention.
Here we go.
Oh,
Uh,
hey, Nicola.
Thought of one, maybe too in depth,
No,
regarding
it's okay.
stepping outside of your brand, like the OGL story. What would you tell somebody on the fence about whether to step out and speak on larger issues or recent events? Um, that could definitely be a deep dive, but to briefly cover it, uh, I think uh, I think we touched on it a little bit when we were talking about there being risks. Anytime you want to
Yeah,
step out of your personal brand, anytime that you're looking to speak on, especially when it comes to politics, because it
that's
can
the
be
worst one.
so
Yeah.
inflammatory. Even if you think you're speaking to an audience that you have curated that has the same views as you, and that has the same compassion that you might have, you'll be in for a dirty surprise sometimes. So there's always that risk of alienating your audience, and maybe the people who disagree with you aren't people you want to be as part of your audience, and that's okay. But you have to recognize that risk for what it is. There's also the possibility of misspeaking when you speak outside of your brand. There's always that chance of like,
Yep.
well, now I did a whoopsie. So it's
Whoopsie whoopsie.
it's not something that I encourage when you're first starting to build a brand, because I feel
Right.
like that is when building an audience is most critical, and having that consistency is going to be at its most important. But that's not to say that you can never do it. It's just you have to be mindful when you do.
And also, I think it's important to consider what things you think are part of your brand,
Mm-hmm.
but you might have only considered it tangentially. So, one thing you won't really see the AB account ever really address politics, but you will see me happily address things like human rights issues, which I
Mm-hmm.
don't think are political because that's just what it is. You'll see
Yeah,
me address, LGBTQ issues. I don't think those are political. It's just human rights stuff,
great.
man.
Yeah, celebrating
So
pride should not be inflammatory, and is something I encourage.
right. So, when it comes to what I consider part of the AB brand, like, celebrating pride and diversity is part of our brand. So, therefore, I'm going to speak on those things. They aren't even outside of my
Mm-hmm.
brand voice. It's just that's part of my brand voice.
Yeah.
The OGL stuff was super outside of that because then we were talking about like legal ramifications
Mm-hmm.
of the TTRPG industry. It had a part of it. When I think you're considering about something that is definitely outside of your brand voice, I think that you should first consider how threatening it is to, you as a brand or you as a person. Um, for us, the OGL situation was absolutely threatening to us as a brand,
Yeah.
so therefore I should speak about it. Um, certain issues are threatening to you as a person, and
Mm-hmm.
therefore you as a brand, and therefore you should speak about them.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. If you are a creator from a marginalized community and there are things happening that affect you personally,
yeah,
we're not saying don't talk about them, because depending on how you market yourself, that could be part of who your brand is. Like being a queer creator is an amazing thing, and there's nothing to say that you can't use that as part of building an audience. Um,
absolutely.
I feel like use isn't even the right word here, as much as it is like utilize your
Celebrate.
community.
Yeah,
Like you,
celebrate it, right?
yeah, it's a celebration of yeah, leverage is another good word for it. Thank you, Kaya. Yeah, leverage your community for the support that they give to other queer creators. Marginalized people want to see other marginalized people succeed, so that isn't
Absolutely.
a bad thing to celebrate and to use uh, your personal identity as part of your brand. That's perfectly acceptable. Kaya also did bring up a really good point when we were talking about risks, that there's also the expectation once you speak on a larger event, that there's going to be the expectation that you do it again in the future if another
Right.
similar event happens. That's absolutely a risk. It's 100% accurate.
Right. So if you consider, whenever this issue comes up, think about if you're going to be comfortable addressing it again in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, like, with our OGL, it's a different, type of risk here, right? But I have no problem punching WotC in the nose again if they do something stupid. I have no problem with that. That's fine by me because they're a big corporation and me small. That's fine. But,
I'm not going to cry
uh,
about calling out Hasbro. That's
right.
not.
I don't care. That's fine by me. I'm fully fine with that. But when it comes to like LGBTQ issues or those kind of things that I am passionate about, I have no problem with,
Mm-hmm.
saying that I'm going to speak about those and I will happily address them again in the future. Um, for myself as a creator, then once you start getting into issues that are, hyper specific for some marginalized communities, I'm not necessarily educated enough
Mm-hmm.
to speak on those, and I don't want to risk saying the wrong thing or, stepping into a zone where it's uncomfortable for everyone involved, including people who like what I do. So instead, what I would rather do is listen and support if I can.
Yeah.
And
Also,
part
amplify
of
the
that,
voices of people who are speaking
absolutely,
from experience.
exactly.
There have been a number of times where, um, when there were issues with trans rights being trampled all
Hmm.
over all throughout this year, and there
This
were
year.
well, historically this year's I feel like been a little bit worse. We're not going to get into it. In any
Okay.
case, there were tons and tons of trans creators who were coming out and telling their story and talking about how it affected them personally. Um, and so me as a hetero creator, I
Yeah,
might be a marginalized community, but I don't have that lived experience. So I'm going to amplify those voices. So you
exactly.
don't have to speak on every topic, especially if it's not something you have a lived experience with. Um, and in some instances, it's better that you don't. It's better that you give that space to the people who should be talking about it, who are comfortable to talk about their lived experiences and how this affects them, whatever
Yeah,
that issue
this
may be.
that reminds me the bundle for trans rights in Florida, for
Mm-hmm,
example,
mm-hmm.
was
That was
I
exactly what
think
I thought of.
right, yeah, I
Too.
think it was it Rue that ran that?
Yes, yeah. Rue's
Fantastic
run a lot of
creator,
amazing.
wonderful human,
Yeah.
nothing but respect there. And I in that
Rue, if you ever
situation,
want
yeah,
to work together, hit us up.
right. If you're out there.
Yeah.
I mean, but yeah, so it's one of those things though where, recognizing if you don't have necessarily the right place to speak from, whether it's in brand or whether it's in person,
Mm-hmm.
and that if you are passionate about something, consider amplifying another voice rather than making your voice part of it. That's probably part of the advice I would give to.
Yeah, agree. Give
Anything
one
else?
last call for questions. All right. Well, I know we ran quite a bit over
A little long.
our anticipated time, but
Just
just wanted
because
to
I
say,
like to talk.
yeah, I just want to say thank you again to everybody for joining us today. I know this panel was something that a lot of people had questions about, and wanted to learn more about.
Yeah.
But any chance we have to talk with our community about helping to build those footsteps for them, we're more than happy to take. So if there are other topics that people want to see spoken about, let us know.
Yeah.
And
Also, pop into the Discord, and if you have any additional questions or things that you want
yeah,
to ask either
Matthew and I
Daniel
are
or I,
always happy to answer.
we're around, and you can feel okay to ping me. I will say that. It's fine.
Yeah, same here.
All right. Thank you all again for attending, and we hope you got something valuable out of this. Hopefully, we'll do some more of these in the future.
Yeah.
I wish you a wonderful evening.
Thank you, everybody.